She fixes a stranger's laptop in a quiet cafe. He's captivated by her brilliance and charm. But when she takes him home and shows him a photo on the wall, he stops breathing. But before we dive into the full story, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. Now, subscribe to the channel and let's get started. The hum of conversation in Maple Street Cafe mingled with the gentle clinking of porcelain and the rhythmic tapping of keyboards. Olivia James occupied her usual corner table, surrounded by the comforting scent of freshly brewed coffee and warm pastries. Her fingers moved with practiced precision across her laptop keyboard, lines of code appearing on the screen in rapid succession. A pair of round glasses perched on her nose, occasionally slipping down when she leaned too close to the screen, absorbed in her work. Olivia wasn't like the other regulars who came to the cafe to pose with their MacBooks while sipping overpriced lattes. At 32, she was the lead developer at Nexus Technologies, though you wouldn't know it from her unassuming demeanor and simple clothing. Today, a soft gray sweater and worn jeans. The cafe was her thinking space, away from the sterile office environment where ideas sometimes felt constrained by corporate walls. The commotion at a nearby table broke her concentration. A man in his mid-30s was frantically pressing keys on his laptop, his frustration evident in the deep furrow of his brow and the occasional muttered curse. His dark hair was disheveled, as if he'd been running his hands through it repeatedly, and his blue button-down shirt was wrinkled at the elbows. A half-empty cup of coffee sat forgotten beside his computer. Olivia tried to refocus on her own work, but each desperate sigh from the stranger pulled at her attention. After the fifth exasperated groan, she took off her glasses, placed them on the table, and stood up. "Excuse me," she said, approaching his table. "Computer trouble?" The man looked up, his deep brown eyes filled with desperation. "You could say that. Everything just froze, and now it won't even start properly. I have a presentation in 3 hours that represents 6 months of work, and the backup is corrupted." His voice cracked slightly on the last word. "Mind if I take a look?" Olivia asked, already pulling over a chair without waiting for his response. "Please, I'm Ethan, by the way. Ethan Morgan. Olivia James." She extended her hand briefly before turning her attention to his laptop. What happened exactly before it froze? As Ethan explained, Olivia's fingers moved across the keyboard with a confidence that came from years of experience. She rebooted the system in safe mode, navigated through recovery options, and assessed the damage with the precision of a surgeon. "You've got a corrupted system file and some serious fragmentation issues," she said, not looking up from the screen. "But your data should still be there. I just need to bypass this and run a recovery sequence." Ethan watched in amazement as she worked, her eyes narrowed in concentration. "Are you in IT?" he asked. A small smile played at the corners of her mouth. "Something like that." 20 minutes later, Olivia had not only recovered Ethan's presentation but had optimized his system performance and installed a more reliable backup solution. "There," she said, sliding the laptop back to him. "Good as new. Actually, better than new. That old antivirus program was eating half your processing power." Ethan stared at the screen, then at Olivia, his expression a mixture of relief and awe. "You're a literal lifesaver. How can I thank you?" "It's nothing, just helping out a fellow cafe dweller." She started to rise, but Ethan gently touched her wrist. "Please, at least let me buy you coffee, or lunch, or—" He hesitated. "Dinner, maybe?" Something in his earnest expression made Olivia pause. It had been 2 years since her last relationship ended, leaving her wary of new connections. But there was something about Ethan's genuine gratitude and warm eyes that disarmed her usual defenses. "Coffee would be nice," she said finally, offering a small smile. "I should get back to my work now, though." "Of course," Ethan said quickly. "But may I join you later, when you're done?" Olivia nodded, returning to her table. Throughout the afternoon, she caught Ethan glancing in her direction, a look of admiration on his face that made her both uncomfortable and flattered. She wasn't used to being noticed, especially not for her technical skills. In a male-dominated industry, her brilliance was often downplayed or overlooked. When she finally closed her laptop, Ethan was immediately at her table with 2 fresh cups of coffee. "I took a chance on a vanilla latte," he said, placing 1 cup in front of her. "The barista said it's your usual. You've been asking about me?" Olivia raised an eyebrow but accepted the coffee. "Just wanted to make sure I got your order right." Ethan smiled, sitting across from her. "So, something like that isn't really an answer. What do you actually do, Olivia James?" "I'm a software developer. I lead the AI integration team at Nexus Technologies." Ethan's eyes widened. "Nexus? They're pioneering some of the most advanced AI systems in the industry. That's incredible." "What about you?" Olivia asked, deflecting the attention. "What was this life or death presentation about?" "I'm an architectural historian. The presentation is for a restoration project, the old Westfield house downtown. It's a beautiful Victorian mansion that's been neglected for decades. My firm is bidding for the restoration contract." As they talked, Olivia found herself increasingly drawn to Ethan's passion for historical preservation and the stories behind old buildings. There was something refreshing about his enthusiasm, so different from the technological focus of her daily life. "Architecture is just history made visible," Ethan explained, his hands moving animatedly. "Every building tells a story about the people who built it, who lived in it. Finding those stories, preserving them, that's what drives me." Their coffee grew cold as the conversation flowed from architecture to technology, from Olivia's childhood fascination with dismantling household electronics to Ethan's collection of architectural sketches. The cafe began to empty around them, but neither seemed to notice the passing time. "I should probably get going," Olivia said eventually, glancing at her watch. "I have an early meeting tomorrow." "Can I see you again?" Ethan asked, the directness of his question catching her off guard. "Maybe dinner this weekend?" Olivia hesitated. She'd been burned before by relationships, retreating into her work as a safe haven. But something about Ethan's sincerity and the ease of their conversation made her nod. "Saturday?" she suggested. "There's a new fusion place on Oak Street I've been wanting to try." "Saturday it is," Ethan agreed, his smile brightening his entire face. Over the next few weeks, Olivia found herself spending more and more time with Ethan. Their dinner at the Fusion restaurant turned into a walk along the riverfront, which led to a Sunday afternoon at the Art Museum, followed by a Tuesday night foreign film. Each meeting revealed new layers to Ethan, his thoughtfulness, his intellect, his quiet sense of humor that matched her own. After a month of dating, Olivia invited Ethan to her apartment for dinner. She rarely allowed people into her personal space, preferring to keep her home as a private sanctuary. But Ethan had somehow slipped past her carefully constructed walls, finding a place in her daily thoughts and routines. Her apartment reflected her personality. Minimalist but warm, with clean lines and organized spaces punctuated by unexpected touches of color and whimsy. A wall of bookshelves contained an eclectic collection ranging from advanced programming texts to classic literature. Her living room featured a comfortable sofa and a state-of-the-art entertainment system she had customized herself. "This is exactly how I imagined your place would be," Ethan said, looking around appreciatively. "Elegant but practical? Is that a polite way of saying boring?" Olivia asked with a small laugh. "Not at all. It's distinctly you." He wandered over to a small collection of framed photographs on a side table, one of Olivia at her college graduation, another of her hiking in the mountains, and a third of an older couple Ethan assumed were her parents. "These your folks?" he asked, picking up the frame. Olivia nodded, coming to stand beside him. "That was taken at their 40th anniversary 3 years ago. They live in Portland now." "They look happy," Ethan observed. "You have your mother's smile." "So I've been told." Olivia took the photo from him, her fingers tracing the outline of her parents' faces. "What about your family?" You've never mentioned them." A shadow crossed Ethan's face. "It's just me now. My father passed when I was in college. Car accident." He paused, swallowing hard. "My mother died 6 years ago. Cancer." "I'm sorry," Olivia said softly, setting down the frame and touching his arm. "It's okay. Well, not okay, but you learn to live with it." He attempted a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "I have some good memories. Mom was amazing, brilliant, kind, always encouraging my interest in old buildings and history. She was an art historian. She sounds wonderful." "She was." Ethan's voice grew quiet. "Sometimes I still expect to call her when I discover something interesting about a building or when I'm having a bad day. Those moments when you automatically reach for the phone before remembering." Olivia squeezed his hand, understanding the particular ache of missing someone. Though her parents were still alive, her younger brother had died in a swimming accident when she was 16. That empty space never quite filled. "Anyway," Ethan said, clearing his throat, "something smells delicious. What are we having?" Dinner was a success. Roasted salmon with herb butter, quinoa salad, and fresh bread Olivia had picked up from the local bakery. They ate at her small dining table, the conversation flowing as easily as the wine Ethan had brought. "I can't believe you made this," Ethan said, taking another bite of salmon. "Is there anything you're not good at?" "Many things," Olivia laughed. "But I've always enjoyed cooking. It's like programming in a way. Follow the steps correctly, and you get the desired output. Except in programming, you don't get to eat your mistakes." "True, though I've wanted to throw my laptop out the window a few times." After dinner, they moved to the living room with their wine glasses. Olivia curled up on one end of the sofa, watching as Ethan examined her collection of vintage cameras displayed on a floating shelf. "These are fantastic," he said, carefully picking up a Kodak Brownie from the 1930s. "Where did you find them?" "Flea markets, antique shops. I started collecting them in college. I like the mechanical precision, the way all the parts work together perfectly." Olivia set down her wine glass and walked over to a wooden chest in the corner. "Actually, I have something you might appreciate, given your love of history." She opened the chest and carefully removed an old photo album bound in faded blue leather. "This belonged to my grandmother. It's full of old family photos, some dating back to the early 1900s. Ethan's eyes lit up as he joined her on the sofa. "May I?" Olivia handed him the album, watching as he gently opened the cover, treating the aged pages with the reverence of someone who understood their value. "These are incredible," he murmured, examining each photo with the practiced eye of a historian. "The clothing styles, the architectural details in the backgrounds, it's like a time capsule." As they flipped through the album, Olivia pointed out various relatives, sharing the snippets of family history she'd learned from her grandmother. Ethan listened attentively, occasionally noting interesting architectural details in the backgrounds of the photos. "Your family has quite a history," he remarked, carefully turning a delicate page. "Mine was less about preserving the past. After my mother died, I realized how much family history was lost with her." "No other relatives?" Olivia asked. "A few distant cousins I've never met." Ethan's finger hovered over a photo of Olivia's grandparents standing in front of an old Victorian house. "This place is beautiful. Where was it?" "My grandparents' first home in Maplewood. They sold it when my father was still young." Olivia leaned closer to examine the photo. "I've never actually seen it in person. The craftsmanship is incredible. Those dormer windows, the gingerbread trim." His voice trailed off as he studied the image, then he shook his head slightly. "Sorry, occupational hazard. I tend to focus on buildings more than people sometimes." "I don't mind. It's nice to see my family history through a different lens." The evening continued, their conversation weaving between personal histories and professional passions. By the time Ethan reluctantly said he should go, it was past midnight. "I had a wonderful time," he said, standing at her door. "Thank you for dinner, and for sharing your family album." "Thank you for appreciating it," Olivia replied. Most people would have been bored after the third or fourth black and white photo of strangers. Those strangers tell a story. All of history is just strangers whose stories we've decided to remember. He reached out, gently tucking a strand of hair behind her ear, his touch lingering on her cheek. "I'd like to help create some history worth remembering with you, Olivia." The sincerity in his voice made her breath catch. When he leaned forward to kiss her, she met him halfway, her hand resting lightly on his chest. The kiss was gentle but certain, a perfect end to the evening. After he left, Olivia found herself touching her lips, replaying the moment in her mind. She wasn't usually one to fall quickly, preferring to analyze relationships with the same logical approach she applied to coding problems. But with Ethan, she found herself making exceptions to her usual rules, opening doors she typically kept locked. The next morning at work, her colleague Maya noticed the change immediately. "Someone's in a good mood," she observed, leaning against Olivia's desk with a knowing smile. "Let me guess. Things are going well with History Guy?" Olivia tried to suppress her smile but failed. "His name is Ethan, and yes, we had dinner at my place last night." Maya's eyebrows shot up. "You let someone into your apartment? The same Olivia who once made me wait in the hallway for 10 minutes while you tidied up? It wasn't that bad. You rearranged your bookshelf while I was standing there with groceries." Olivia laughed, remembering the incident. "Fine, yes. This is different. He's different." "Different how? Besides being gorgeous based on that photo you showed me." Olivia considered the question, trying to articulate what drew her to Ethan. "He's thoughtful, passionate about his work. He listens when I talk about coding instead of glazing over, and he doesn't try to mansplain technology to me, which is refreshing." "Sounds promising. When do I get to meet him?" "Let's not get ahead of ourselves. We've only been dating for a month." "A month is practically a commitment ceremony for you," Maya teased. "Remember, Greg? You ended things after 2 weeks because he used the wrong syntax in a text message. He used 5 exclamation points in a row. It showed poor judgment," Olivia protested. But she was smiling. Maya wasn't entirely wrong. She did tend to find reasons to end relationships before they got serious. With Ethan, however, she was finding reasons to continue. Over the following weeks, those reasons multiplied. Ethan was attentive without being clingy, intelligent without being condescending. He sent her articles about innovative tech that might interest her, and she found herself researching historical buildings in their city to surprise him with obscure facts. 2 months into their relationship, Ethan invited her to the Westfield house, the Victorian mansion his firm had won the contract to restore. "It's still very much a work in progress," he warned as they approached the imposing structure. "Watch your step." The house sat on a hill overlooking the city, its once grand facade now weathered and worn. Scaffolding covered portions of the exterior, and construction equipment dotted the overgrown gardens. Despite its dilapidated state, Olivia could see the beauty Ethan had described. The elegant proportions, the ornate woodwork, the soaring turrets that reached toward the clouds. "It's magnificent," she breathed. "How old is it?" Built in 1887 by Edward Westfield, a railroad tycoon. The family owned it until the 1950s, then it was divided into apartments. It's been abandoned since the early 2000s. Ethan unlocked the massive front door, which creaked open dramatically. The Historical Society finally secured funding for restoration last year. Inside, the house was a curious mix of decay and grandeur. Sunlight streamed through dirty windows, illuminating intricate parquet floors and elaborately carved banisters. The air smelled of dust and old wood, with hints of the linseed oil the restoration team was using on the paneling. Ethan led her through the ground floor, pointing out original features and explaining the restoration process with infectious enthusiasm. His expertise was evident in every detail he highlighted, from the hand-painted ceiling medallions to the custom-designed door hinges. "This house is like a time machine," he explained, running his hand lovingly along a marble fireplace mantel. "Every element tells us something about the people who lived here, what they valued, how they saw themselves in the world." As they climbed the grand staircase to the second floor, Olivia found herself increasingly captivated, not just by the house but by Ethan's passion for it. He spoke about the building as if it were a living entity with secrets to share, a perspective that resonated with her own view of technology as something organic and evolving. "And this," Ethan said, opening a set of double doors with a flourish, "was the family library." Olivia gasped as they entered a two-story room lined with empty built-in bookshelves. A gallery ran around the upper level, accessible by a spiral staircase in the corner. Tall windows flooded the space with afternoon light, dust motes dancing in the golden beams. "It's breathtaking," she said, turning slowly to take in the full scope of the room. "I knew you'd appreciate it. I'm fighting to restore it exactly as it was, rather than converting it to office space like some of the board members want." Ethan walked to the center of the room, looking up at the coffered ceiling. "Can't you just imagine the original library? Thousands of books, leather chairs by the fireplace, perhaps a ladder to reach the highest shelves?" Olivia smiled, charmed by his vision. "You can practically see the ghosts of the past readers." "Exactly," Ethan's eyes lit up. "That's what I love about historic preservation. It's not just about saving old buildings, it's about honoring the human experiences that happened within these walls." They continued their tour, with Ethan showing her the family bedrooms, servants' quarters, and finally, a small room tucked under the eaves that he was using as a temporary office. "This is where I escape when the contractors are driving me crazy," he explained, gesturing to a cluttered desk covered with blueprints and reference books. Photos and sketches papered the walls, detailed drawings of architectural elements, historical images of the house in its prime, and pictures of similar mansions from the same era. Olivia moved closer to examine one of the historical photos. "Is this the original family? The Westfields?" "Yes, that's Edward and Catherine with their 3 children taken around 1890. She studied the formal portrait, the stern-faced patriarch, his elegant wife, and 3 solemn children in their Sunday best. "They look so serious." "Long exposure times," Ethan explained. "Had to hold still for ages. Plus, smiling in photos wasn't really a thing until the 20th century. As Olivia scanned the other images on the wall, one caught her eye, a more recent photo, probably from the 1970s based on the clothes, showing a young woman sitting on the grand staircase they had just climbed. Unlike the Westfields, she was smiling broadly, her face alive with joy. Something about her seemed vaguely familiar. "Who's this?" Olivia asked, pointing to the photo. Ethan glanced over, and a soft expression crossed his face. "That's my mother, actually. She visited this house when she was in college doing research for her art history degree. She loved this place." He touched the edge of the photo gently. "Finding her picture in the Historical Society archives was like a sign that I was meant to work on this restoration." Olivia studied the image more closely. The young woman had Ethan's same warm brown eyes and expressive mouth. Her hair was longer, falling in waves past her shoulders, but the resemblance was clear. "She's beautiful," Olivia said. "You have her smile." "So I've been told." Ethan echoed her words from their dinner at her apartment, a sad smile playing at his lips. "She would have loved to see this place being restored. She was always dragging me to old buildings as a kid, teaching me to appreciate the craftsmanship, the history." "She's the reason you became an architectural historian?" Ethan nodded. "She used to say that buildings outlive us all, that by preserving them we're having a conversation across time with both the past and the future." He turned away from the photo, blinking rapidly. "Sorry, I still get emotional sometimes." "Don't apologize," Olivia said softly, taking his hand. I think it's beautiful that you're carrying on her passion." He squeezed her hand gratefully. "Thank you for understanding. Not everyone does." As the sun began to set, casting long shadows through the dusty windows, they made their way back downstairs. Ethan locked the massive front door behind them, the sound echoing in the quiet evening air. "Thank you for showing me this place," Olivia said as they walked back to his car. "I can see why you love it." "Thank you for wanting to see it, for understanding why it matters." Ethan opened the passenger door for her, then paused. "You know, there's a benefit gala for the Historical Society next weekend. Black tie, champagne, boring speeches." He smiled hopefully. "Would you be my date?" "Black tie, Olivia pretended to consider. "Will there be tiny fancy appetizers that don't actually fill you up?" "Absolutely. Microscopic quiches guaranteed." "Well, in that case, how could I refuse?" She smiled up at him, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the summer evening. The night of the gala arrived with a flurry of preparation. Olivia stood in front of her full-length mirror, assessing her reflection with uncharacteristic uncertainty. The midnight blue gown she'd chosen fell in elegant folds to the floor, its simple lines emphasizing her tall, slender frame. She rarely dressed up like this, preferring the comfort of jeans and sweaters to formal attire. "You look stunning," Maya said from the doorway of Olivia's bedroom. She had come over to help with hair and makeup, knowing Olivia's usual routine consisted of little more than mascara and lip balm. "Are you sure it's not too much? Or not enough?" Olivia turned sideways, examining the dress's open back. "It's perfect. Ethan's jaw is going to hit the floor." Maya stepped forward to adjust a strand of Olivia's dark hair, which they had styled in loose waves. "I still can't believe you're actually going to a fancy gala. The Olivia I know would rather spend Saturday night debugging code." "I'm not entirely sure what I'm getting myself into," Olivia admitted. "These society events aren't exactly my natural habitat." Maya applied a final touch of lipstick to Olivia's mouth. "Just be yourself. That's who Ethan is crazy about." The doorbell rang, and Olivia felt a flutter of nerves. Maya squeezed her arm reassuringly before going to answer the door. Olivia heard the murmur of voices in the living room, Maya's bright laugh followed by Ethan's deeper tones. Taking a deep breath, she picked up her small clutch and walked out to greet him. Ethan stood by the window, a vision in his classic black tuxedo. When he turned and saw her, the expression on his face made all her uncertainty vanish. His eyes widened, taking her in with clear admiration. "Olivia," he breathed, "you look incredible." "You clean up pretty well yourself," she replied, taking in his tailored appearance with appreciation. Maya looked between them, grinning. "I'll just be going now. Have fun, you two. Don't do anything I wouldn't do." "That leaves a lot of options open," Olivia quipped, making her friend laugh as she departed. Alone with Ethan, Olivia felt suddenly shy. It was silly, she knew. They'd been dating for months, had shared intimate conversations and passionate kisses. But something about the formality of the evening, the way he looked at her in her gown, made her feel as if they were starting something new. "I brought you something," Ethan said, reaching into his pocket. He pulled out a small velvet box. "Ethan," Olivia said, her heart skipping. "You didn't need to. It's just a loan," he assured her, opening the box to reveal a pair of antique pearl earrings set in delicate silver filigree. "They were my mother's. I thought they might complement your dress." Touched by the gesture, Olivia carefully removed the earrings from the box. "They're beautiful. Are you sure you want me to wear them?" "Absolutely. They've been sitting in a drawer for too long. My mother would have loved to see them worn again, especially by someone who appreciates beautiful craftsmanship." Olivia put them on, the cool weight of the pearls a gentle presence against her neck. Ethan watched her with a soft expression that made her heart flutter. "Perfect," he said. "Ready to brave the social elite of the preservation world?" as ready as I'll ever be." The Historical Society Gala was held in the grand ballroom of the city's oldest luxury hotel, a fitting venue for an event celebrating architectural heritage. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over the space, which was filled with elegantly dressed attendees, sipping champagne and engaging in polite conversation. Ethan guided Olivia through the crowd with a hand gently resting on the small of her back. He seemed to know almost everyone, introducing her to board members, donors, and fellow preservationists with easy grace. Olivia did her best to remember names and affiliations, though the sheer number of introductions made it challenging. "Ethan, my boy." A distinguished older gentleman with silver hair approached them, clapping Ethan on the shoulder. "The man of the hour. The Westfield restoration is the talk of the evening." "Charles," Ethan greeted him warmly. "Allow me to introduce Olivia James. Olivia, this is Charles Whitmore, chairman of the Historical Society Board and my mentor." "A pleasure to meet you, Ms. James," Charles said, taking her hand. "I hope Ethan hasn't been boring you with endless talk of cornices and flying buttresses." Olivia smiled. "Not at all. I find his passion for preservation fascinating." "And what do you do, my dear?" "I lead the AI integration team at Nexus Technologies." Charles's eyebrows rose. "Impressive. So you're the practical one in this relationship, all about the future while our Ethan is stuck in the past?" "I wouldn't say that," Olivia replied. "Technology and preservation aren't as opposed as they might seem. Both require respect for what came before while innovating for what comes next." Charles looked at her with newfound appreciation. "Well said. We need more forward thinkers in our little corner of the world." He turned to Ethan. "Keep this one close, my boy. She's got a good head on her shoulders." With a wink, he moved on to greet other guests. "Sorry about that," Ethan said when Charles was out of earshot. "The stuck in the past comment. I get that a lot." "No need to apologize. I meant what I said. I admire your dedication to preservation." Olivia accepted a glass of champagne from a passing waiter. "Besides, I get plenty of comments about having my head in the digital clouds. People love to put others in neat little boxes." Ethan clinked his glass against hers. "To defying expectations, then." As the evening progressed, Olivia found herself enjoying the event more than she'd anticipated. The speeches were indeed dull, but the company was pleasant, and watching Ethan in his element, discussing his passion with like-minded individuals, was a revelation. He seemed to light up from within when talking about the Westfield restoration, his enthusiasm infectious. During a break in the formal program, Ethan led her to a quiet corner of the ballroom. "Holding up okay? I know these events can be overwhelming." "I'm having a lovely time, actually. Your colleagues are very welcoming. They're impressed by you. Charles hasn't stopped singing your praises. Apparently your comment about technology and preservation bridging time was exactly the perspective we need in today's world." Ethan mimicked Charles's pompous tone, making Olivia laugh. "I was just being honest. This whole evening has made me think about connections, how we're all linked to the past in ways we might not realize." She touched the pearl earrings gently. "Like these. They carry a history with them, memories of your mother, and now they're part of our story too." Ethan's expression softened. "That's a beautiful way to think about it." He took her hand, his thumb caressing her palm. "Thank you for coming tonight. Having you here means more than I can say." "There's nowhere I'd rather be," Olivia replied, surprised to find she meant it completely. The orchestra began playing a waltz and couples moved onto the dance floor. Ethan's eyes lit up. "May I have this dance, Ms. James? I should warn you I'm not much of a dancer. Just follow my lead." To her surprise, Ethan was an excellent dancer, guiding her around the floor with confidence and grace. Olivia relaxed into his arms, allowing herself to be led through the steps. "Where did you learn to dance like this?" she asked as he executed a perfect turn. "My mother insisted I take lessons as a teenager, said it was an essential skill for a gentleman." He smiled at the memory. I complained endlessly at the time, but now I'm grateful. As they danced, Olivia felt a peculiar sense of déjà vu, as if they had done this before, in another time. Perhaps it was the historic setting, or the timeless music, but she felt connected to something larger than herself, a continuity that stretched backward and forward through time. Later that night, after Ethan had driven her home and kissed her goodnight with a tenderness that left her breathless, Olivia removed the pearl earrings carefully, placing them back in their velvet box. She ran her finger over them, thinking about the woman who had worn them before, Ethan's mother, whose love of history had shaped her son's path. The following week was hectic for both of them. Olivia was immersed in a critical project at Nexus, working late into the evenings to meet an important deadline. Ethan had unexpected complications at the Westfield house when workers discovered structural damage that required immediate attention. They stayed in touch through texts and brief phone calls, but it wasn't until Friday that they were finally able to see each other again. Ethan suggested dinner at his place, a first, as they had always met at restaurants or at Olivia's apartment. "Fair warning," he said when she arrived. "My place isn't nearly as organized as yours." Ethan's apartment was in a converted warehouse downtown with high ceilings, exposed brick walls, and large windows that overlooked the city. Unlike Olivia's minimalist space, his home was a comfortable jumble of books, artifacts, and memorabilia. Bookshelves overflowed with volumes on architecture and history, interspersed with photographs and small architectural models. "This is wonderful," Olivia said, taking it all in. "It's so... you." "Cluttered and chaotic?" Ethan laughed, taking her coat. "Warm, full of stories and history." He gave her a quick tour, explaining the origins of various objects: a piece of carved stone from a demolished church, a set of antique drafting tools that had belonged to his grandfather, a collection of vintage postcards featuring historic buildings from around the world. In the living room, a wall was dedicated to framed photographs. Most were architectural in nature, buildings Ethan had studied or worked on, but interspersed among them were personal photos. Olivia was drawn to one of a young Ethan, perhaps 12 years old, standing beside a smiling woman in front of what appeared to be the Roman Colosseum. "Your mother?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. The resemblance between them was striking. "Yes, our trip to Italy when I was in 7th grade. That was the trip that cemented my fascination with historic architecture." Ethan stood beside her, looking at the photo with a mixture of joy and sadness. "She saved for years to take me. Said every future historian needed to see Rome. She sounds like an amazing woman." She was. Ethan pointed to another photo, this one showing his mother in academic regalia. This was at her PhD graduation. She specialized in Renaissance art and architecture. As Olivia looked at more photos, she began to feel a strange sense of familiarity. There was something about Ethan's mother's face that tugged at her memory, beyond the resemblance to Ethan himself. She tried to dismiss the feeling, attributing it to having seen the photo at the Westfield house, but it persisted. "Dinner's almost ready," Ethan said, breaking her contemplation. "I hope you like lasagna. It's my one reliable dish." "Sounds perfect," Olivia replied, following him to the kitchen. Dinner was delicious, the lasagna rich with cheese and herbs, accompanied by a simple salad and warm bread. They sat at Ethan's small dining table, surrounded by the soft glow of candles he had lit. "I've been thinking," Ethan said as they finished their meal. "The Westfield restoration has a major milestone coming up in 2 weeks. We're completing the exterior work. There's going to be a small ceremony, just the team and a few board members. Would you come? It would mean a lot to have you there." "Of course," Olivia said without hesitation. "I'd love to see the progress you've made." Ethan reached across the table, taking her hand. "Thank you for being interested in my work, for understanding why it matters to me." "Thank you for sharing it with me." She squeezed his hand. "It's been eye-opening, seeing the world through your perspective. You've made me appreciate history in a way I never did before." Later, as they sat on his sofa, sharing a bottle of wine and talking about everything and nothing, Olivia felt a contentment she hadn't experienced in previous relationships. With Ethan, she didn't feel the need to hide parts of herself or to perform a more socially acceptable version of her personality. He accepted her analytical mind, her occasional social awkwardness, her passion for coding that sometimes bordered on obsession. When Olivia returned to her apartment that night, she found herself lingering in front of her family photo album. She pulled it from the shelf and sat cross-legged on her bed, flipping through the pages with newfound curiosity. Had she overlooked something? She examined each old family photo carefully, trying to pinpoint what had triggered that strange sense of recognition when looking at Ethan's mother. Perhaps it was nothing, just her mind making connections where none existed. But as she studied the faces of her ancestors, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was missing something important. The next morning, she called her mother, something she typically did only on Sundays. "Olivia?" Her mother's voice was tinged with concern. "Is everything all right? You never call on Saturdays." "Everything's fine, Mom. I was looking through Grandma's old photo album and had some questions." "What kind of questions?" Her mother sounded relieved but curious. "About our family history. Do we have any connection to the Westfield house? It's this old Victorian mansion downtown that's being restored." "Westfield house?" Her mother paused. "The name sounds vaguely familiar, but I can't place it. Why do you ask?" "Just curious. Olivia hesitated, then decided to be forthright. "The man I'm seeing is the architectural historian in charge of the restoration." "The man you're seeing?" Her mother's tone shifted to interest. "You haven't mentioned anyone. Tell me about him." Olivia spent the next 20 minutes telling her mother about Ethan, surprised by how easily the words flowed. She described his passion for history, his kindness, the way he listened when she talked about her work. "He sounds wonderful, honey. I'm so glad you've met someone who appreciates you." Her mother's warmth came through the line, making Olivia smile. "Your father and I would love to meet him sometime." "Maybe when you visit next month," Olivia suggested, surprising herself with the offer. She usually kept her parents and her dating life firmly separated. "We'd like that very much." Her mother paused. "About the Westfield house, I can ask your Aunt Elaine. She's the family historian these days, always digging into genealogy websites and old records." "Thanks, Mom. It's probably nothing." After they hung up, Olivia tried to dismiss her lingering questions. She had work to focus on, a major project due the following week that required her full attention. But as she coded, her mind kept drifting back to the photos of Ethan's mother, to that nagging sense of familiarity she couldn't explain. 3 days later, Olivia received an email from her Aunt Elaine, with the subject line, "Westfield Connection?" The message was brief. "Your mother mentioned you were asking about the Westfield house. Interesting timing. I've been researching that branch of our family tree recently. Call me when you have a chance. Love, Aunt Elaine." Olivia stared at the message, a strange mixture of anticipation and unease settling in her stomach. She dialed her aunt's number immediately. "Olivia, darling," Aunt Elaine's enthusiastic voice greeted her. "I'm so glad you called. I've been dying to share my discoveries with someone who might actually care." Elaine was her father's older sister, a retired librarian with an insatiable curiosity about family history. She had traced their lineage back to the Mayflower on one side and to Irish immigrants who arrived during the potato famine on the other. "What did you find?" Olivia asked, trying to keep her voice casual. "Well, it's quite fascinating. Your great-great-grandmother on your father's side, Margaret Sullivan, was a housekeeper at the Westfield house in the late 1800s. Olivia sat up straighter. "Really?" "Yes, she worked for the original owners, the Westfield family. According to census records, she lived in the servants' quarters from 1889 to 1895. Elaine's voice took on the animated quality it always did when she discussed genealogy. She eventually married the gardener's son and moved out, but her connection to the house is well documented. That's surprising. Olivia's mind was racing. Do you have any photos of her? As a matter of fact, I do. The Historical Society had some staff photos from the estate. I'll email them to you. Within minutes, Olivia's phone pinged with a new message. She opened the attachment, a formal photograph of the Westfield House staff, dated 1890. In the back row, among a dozen serious-faced servants, stood a young woman with a strong resemblance to Olivia's grandmother. The caption identified her as Margaret Sullivan, age 19. She looks just like Grandma, Olivia murmured. The family resemblance is striking, Elaine agreed. Your father has her eyes, and you have her chin. Olivia studied the image, feeling a strange connection to this ancestor she had never known about. Margaret's expression was solemn, as was typical in photographs from that era, but there was a quiet dignity in her posture. Thank you for sharing this, Aunt Elaine. There's more, her aunt continued eagerly. I found a mention of Margaret in Edward Westfield's journal. Apparently, she was quite intelligent. He notes that he caught her reading books from the family library, which was unusual for household staff at the time. Instead of reprimanding her, he allowed her to borrow books when her duties were complete. Something clicked in Olivia's mind. The grand library Ethan had shown her, the two-story room he was fighting to preserve exactly as it had been. Her ancestor had stood in that same room, had touched those same shelves. Olivia, are you still there? Yes, sorry, I was just processing. It's strange to think about these connections to the past. That's why I love genealogy, Elaine said. It reminds us that history isn't abstract, it's personal. Our ancestors' lives shape our own in ways we rarely consider. After thanking her aunt again, Olivia sat at her desk, staring at the photo of Margaret Sullivan. Should she tell Ethan about this connection? It seemed almost too coincidental, her dating the man restoring a house where her ancestor had worked over a century ago. Before she could decide, her phone rang. It was Ethan. Hey, she answered, her heart beating a little faster at the sound of his voice. Hey, yourself. I was wondering if you're free tonight. I've had a breakthrough with the library restoration and could use a second opinion. Olivia glanced at the photo of Margaret still open on her computer. Actually, I've had a bit of a breakthrough of my own. Something I'd like to share with you. Intriguing. Dinner at Westfield House? I can pick up that Thai food you like. It's a date. That evening, Olivia arrived at the mansion carrying both the printout of the staff photo and her laptop, which contained a digital copy of the full family album. Ethan greeted her with a kiss and led her to the library where he had set up a makeshift dining area on a workable covered with blueprints. So what's this breakthrough? She asked as they unpacked the food containers. We found the original library catalog, Ethan said excitedly. It was hidden in a compartment beneath one of the window seats. It lists every book the Westfields owned, complete with acquisition dates and Edward's personal notes on many of them. He showed her the leather-bound ledger, its pages yellowed but the handwriting still clear and legible. This is invaluable for the restoration. We can now recreate the library exactly as it was, tracking down the same editions or at least visually similar books for the shelves. Olivia ran her finger gently over Edward Westfield's flowing script. It's amazing how something so simple connects us directly to the past. Exactly. Ethan's eyes shone with enthusiasm. And look at this entry. He carefully turned to a page near the middle of the ledger. Edward made notes about who in the household borrowed which books. Most entries are family members, but there are occasional references to staff, including someone named Margaret, who apparently had quite sophisticated literary tastes. Olivia's breath caught. Margaret Sullivan? Ethan looked up, surprised. Yes. How did you know? That's my breakthrough. She pulled out the staff photo and slid it across to him. Margaret Sullivan was my great-great-grandmother. She worked here as a housekeeper from 1889 to 1895. Ethan stared at the photo, then at Olivia, his expression a mixture of disbelief and wonder. "You're kidding? Your ancestor worked in this house?" "According to my Aunt Elaine, who's the family genealogist, she just discovered the connection when I asked if our family had any ties to Westfield House." "Why did you ask?" Ethan was still processing the revelation. Olivia hesitated. "I'm not entirely sure. Just a feeling I had, I suppose." Ethan examined the photo more closely. The resemblance is clear. Same determined chin. He glanced up at her with a smile. Same intelligent eyes. "My aunt found a mention in Edward Westfield's journal that Margaret was caught reading books from the family library, and instead of punishing her, he allowed her to borrow them. That tracks with what I've learned about Edward. Despite his position and wealth, he was remarkably progressive for his time. He established one of the city's first free lending libraries and advocated for women's education." Olivia gestured to the ledger. "And now we have proof that my ancestor stood in this very room, reading these very books." "It's extraordinary," Ethan said softly. "Of all the houses in the city, you have a direct connection to the one I'm restoring." He reached across the table to take her hand. "Some might call that fate. Or an interesting coincidence," Olivia said, though she wasn't entirely convinced. The connection felt significant somehow, as if invisible threads of history were weaving them together. They spent the rest of the evening exploring the library catalog, with Ethan pointing out books that Margaret had borrowed. Works by Jane Austen, Charles Dickens, and more surprisingly, scientific texts on astronomy and mathematics. She was clearly intellectually curious, Ethan observed, unusual for someone in her position at that time. "Maybe that's why I felt drawn to this place," Olivia mused. "Some ancestral memory pulling me back." As they were preparing to leave, walking through the grand entrance hall, Olivia stopped suddenly, her attention caught by a small framed photograph on a side table that hadn't been there during her previous visit. "Is that your mother?" she asked, moving closer to the image. "Yes. I found another photo of her here and had it framed. It feels right, having her present during the restoration." Ethan picked up the frame. This was taken when she was about 25 during her first visit to document the house for her graduate thesis. Olivia studied the photograph, a young woman with Ethan's eyes and smile standing on the mansion's front steps, a camera around her neck and a notebook in her hand. She was beautiful, with a vibrant energy that seemed to radiate from the image. But there was something else, something that made Olivia's heart beat faster. "What was her name?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Catherine," Ethan replied. "Catherine Morgan, though she published her academic work under her maiden name, Catherine Lewis." Olivia's hands trembled slightly as she took out her phone and pulled up her family photo album. She scrolled quickly to a specific image, her grandmother as a young woman, standing beside her sister. "This is my grandmother Elizabeth," she said, showing Ethan the photo. "And this is her sister, my great-aunt Catherine, who died when I was a baby." Ethan's face went pale as he looked at the image. The resemblance between his mother and Olivia's great-aunt was unmistakable. They could have been twins. That's impossible," he whispered, looking between the two photos. "My mother was adopted. She never knew her birth family." Olivia felt a chill run down her spine. "When was your mother born?" "April 10th, 1955. That's..." Olivia swallowed hard. "That's my great-aunt Catherine's birthday." The silence that followed was deafening. Ethan and Olivia stared at each other, both struggling to process the implications of what they had just discovered. "This can't be right," Ethan finally said, his voice strained. He placed his mother's photograph next to Olivia's phone, comparing the two images. "The resemblance is uncanny, but it could be a coincidence," Olivia finished, though she didn't sound convinced. "People can look alike without being related." Born on the same day, with the same name, looking identical? Ethan shook his head. That's beyond coincidence. Olivia sat down on the grand staircase, suddenly feeling lightheaded. If Ethan's mother was truly her great-aunt Catherine, then Ethan was her… what? Second cousin? The realization made her stomach twist uncomfortably. "We need more information," she said, her analytical mind taking over. "What do you know about your mother's adoption?" Ethan joined her on the stairs, leaving a careful distance between them. "Not much. It was closed, which was typical in the 1950s. She knew she was born in this city and that she was adopted as an infant. Her adoptive parents, my grandparents, never shared details about her birth family." "Did she ever try to find them?" "She thought about it, especially after I was born. She told me once that becoming a mother herself made her wonder about the woman who had given birth to her." Ethan ran a hand through his hair, a gesture Olivia now recognized as a sign of his distress. "But then my father died when I was in college, and she was diagnosed with cancer a few years later. The search got put aside." Olivia nodded, thinking about her family's side. "My great-aunt Catherine. We were always told she died in a car accident when she was 19. That would have been around 1974. "My mother would have been 19 in 1974, Ethan said quietly. "But she was very much alive, starting her undergraduate degree." They sat in uncomfortable silence, the weight of possibility heavy between them. "I should call my parents," Olivia finally said. "They might know more. My grandmother passed away last year, but my dad might remember stories about his aunt." Ethan nodded. "And I can check my mother's papers. She kept boxes of personal documents that I haven't had the heart to go through since she died." They made plans to reconnect the next day, both needing time to absorb the shock and gather more information. The easy warmth that had characterized their previous partings was replaced by an awkward hesitation. Neither seemed to know how to say goodbye in light of their discovery. "I'll call you tomorrow," Ethan said finally, his expression troubled. "Yes, tomorrow." Olivia reached out as if to touch his arm, then pulled back. "Good night, Ethan." As she drove home, Olivia's mind raced. If their suspicions were correct, the man she had been falling in love with was her cousin. The thought made her physically uncomfortable. Yet at the same time, a part of her mourned what they might be losing, the deep connection they had formed over the past months, the future they had tentatively begun to imagine together. Back at her apartment, Olivia called her father despite the late hour. "Olivia?" He answered on the third ring, sounding concerned. "Is everything all right?" "I'm fine, Dad. I need to ask you about Great-Aunt Catherine." "Catherine?" Her father sounded surprised. "What brought this up?" Olivia hesitated, unsure how much to share. "I've been looking into our family history. I know she died young, but I don't know many details." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "It's not something we talked about much. My mother, your grandmother, found it painful to discuss." "What happened to her? Was it really a car accident?" Another pause, longer this time. "No," her father finally said, his voice quiet. "That was the story we told outside the family. The truth is, Catherine ran away when she was 19. There was a huge falling out with my grandparents. I was just a kid, but I remember the screaming, the crying." Olivia's heart began to race. What was the fight about? Catherine was pregnant, unmarried. This was 1974. Things were different then, especially in our Catholic family. My grandparents wanted her to give the baby up for adoption. Catherine refused. Her father sighed heavily. One morning she was just gone. Left a note saying not to look for her. My mother never saw her sister again. "So she didn't die in an accident," Olivia said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Not then, no. A few years later, my grandparents received a letter from a lawyer in California informing them that Catherine had passed away. Heart condition, apparently. The letter mentioned nothing about a child, and my grandparents didn't ask. They were rigid people. In their minds, Catherine had brought shame on the family. "That's horrible," Olivia whispered. "It was a different time," her father said, though he didn't sound convinced. "Why the sudden interest in Catherine?" Olivia took a deep breath. "Dad, I think I might have found her child, the baby she was pregnant with when she ran away." "What? How?" "It's complicated. I need to confirm some things first. But would there be any documents, photos, anything from Catherine's life that might help?" "Your grandmother kept a box of Catherine's things. I have it in the attic somewhere. I can look for it tomorrow." "That would be wonderful. Thank you, Dad." After hanging up, Olivia sat at her kitchen table staring at nothing. The story her father had told aligned with the timeline of Ethan's mother's life. Catherine had run away pregnant in 1974, while Ethan's mother had claimed she was adopted at birth in 1955. One of those narratives was false. She barely slept that night, her mind churning with questions and possibilities. By morning, she had developed a methodical plan to uncover the truth, approaching the problem as she would a complex coding challenge, breaking it down into manageable pieces, identifying the information needed, and planning how to obtain it. Ethan called just after 9, sounding as tired as she felt. "I found my mother's birth certificate," he said without preamble. "The original one, not the amended version that lists my grandparents. It says she was born on April 10, 1955 at St. Mary's Hospital. Mother's name is listed as Jane Doe. They didn't know or didn't record her real name." "That doesn't help us much," Olivia replied, making notes. "My father told me something interesting, though. The story about my great-aunt dying in a car accident was a family fiction. She actually ran away in 1974 because she was pregnant and her parents wanted her to give the baby up for adoption." 1974? Ethan sounded confused. "But my mother would have been 19 then." "Exactly. The timelines don't match. Either your mother wasn't my great-aunt or someone has been lying about when she was born," Ethan finished. "My father is looking for a box of Catherine's belongings. It might contain something useful. I'm going through more of my mother's papers today. She kept everything: letters, diaries, photographs." They agreed to continue their separate investigations and meet the following day to share what they discovered. Olivia spent the day researching adoption practices in the 1950s and 1970s, learning about closed adoptions and the limited rights of birth parents during those eras. She also created a timeline of what they knew for certain about both Catherine Lewis and Catherine Morgan, looking for points of contradiction or confirmation. When her father called that evening to say he had found the box, Olivia drove immediately to her parents' home in the suburbs. "I haven't opened it," her father said, placing a dusty cardboard box on the kitchen table. "It was sealed when Mom gave it to me after your grandparents died." Together, they carefully opened the box. Inside were the artifacts of a young woman's life cut short, or perhaps transformed. School notebooks, a high school yearbook, photographs, letters tied with faded ribbon, a small jewelry box containing a delicate silver necklace with a heart-shaped locket. "I remember this," her father said, picking up the locket. "Catherine wore it all the time. My mother gave it to her for her 16th birthday." Olivia opened the locket, finding a tiny photograph inside. Catherine as a teenager, smiling brightly at the camera. The resemblance to the photos Ethan had shown her of his mother was undeniable. They continued sifting through the box, finding nothing that directly addressed the mystery until they reached the bottom, where a sealed envelope lay, addressed simply, "To my family." "This looks like her handwriting," her father said, turning the envelope over. "But I've never seen it before. It must have been placed in the box after I last saw these things." With trembling fingers, he opened the envelope and unfolded the letter inside. He began to read aloud. "My dear family, if you are reading this, it means I have gone through with my plan to leave. I cannot and will not give up my baby. I know you believe you are protecting me and our family's reputation, but some things are more important than appearances. I am going to California to start a new life. I have friends there who will help me. Please don't try to find me. This is my choice, and I am at peace with it. Perhaps one day, when tempers have cooled and hearts have softened, we can find a way back to each other. Until then, know that I love you all despite our differences. All my love, Catherine." Olivia's father lowered the letter, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. "All these years, we thought she died alone, but she was trying to protect her child." He looked up at Olivia. "You really think you've found her baby?" "I think it's possible," Olivia said carefully. "There's more to the story, but I need to confirm a few things first." She asked to borrow some of the photographs and the locket, promising to explain everything soon. On her drive home, she called Ethan. "I found something," she said when he answered. "Several somethings, actually, including a letter Catherine wrote when she ran away. She definitely went to California pregnant and planned to keep her baby." "California," Ethan repeated softly. "My mother grew up in California. My grandparents moved to the East Coast when she was in high school." He paused. "I've been going through her college yearbooks. She started university in 1973, not 1974 like I thought. The dates would work if she wasn't born in 1955 like her adoption papers claim," Olivia finished. "I found her diary from when she was pregnant with me," Ethan continued. "There's an entry where she writes about feeling conflicted about her own adoption. She says, 'I wonder if my birth mother felt this same fierce protection, this unbreakable bond. Did she want to keep me as desperately as I want to keep my child?'" Olivia's throat tightened with emotion. "My father says Catherine refused to give up her baby. She ran away to protect it, to protect your mother." "We need to talk in person," Ethan said. "This is too important for phone calls." They arranged to meet the next morning at a quiet cafe, neutral territory, away from both the Westfield house with its complicated history and their personal spaces now laden with new meaning. Olivia arrived at the cafe first, securing a quiet corner table away from other patrons. She arranged her findings on the table: photocopies of the letter, several photographs of Catherine, and the silver locket. Her stomach churned with anxiety as she waited, uncertain what this meeting would mean for her relationship with Ethan. When he walked in, Olivia's heart constricted. Despite everything, she still felt that pull toward him, that sense of connection that had drawn her from the beginning. He looked as exhausted as she felt, with dark circles under his eyes and his normally neat hair disheveled. "Hi," he said simply, setting down a worn leather briefcase. "Hi," she replied, equally subdued. For a moment, neither spoke. The easy rapport they had developed over months of dating had been replaced by an awkward tension. "I ordered you coffee," Olivia finally said, gesturing to the steaming mug in front of the empty chair. "Thanks." Ethan sat down, wrapping his hands around the mug as if seeking its warmth. "This is not how I expected things to go when I asked you to fix my laptop a few months ago." The comment broke the tension slightly, earning a small smile from Olivia. "Not exactly, no." Ethan opened his briefcase and took out a folder. "I've been up all night going through my mother's papers. I found some things that might help us make sense of this." "Me too." Olivia gestured to her materials. "Where should we start?" "Chronologically, maybe?" Ethan suggested. "What do we know about Catherine Lewis in the early 1970s? Olivia slid forward a photograph of a young woman standing on the steps of a college building. "This is Catherine in 1973, according to the date on the back. She was attending the local community college, studying art history." Ethan stared at the photograph. "She looks so much like my mother at that age." "The resemblance is undeniable," Olivia agreed. "According to my father, in 1974, Catherine discovered she was pregnant, refused to give up the baby, and ran away to California after a huge fight with her parents. And my mother," Ethan said, pulling out a document, "claimed she was born in 1955 and adopted as an infant. This is her birth certificate, which lists her birth date as April 10, 1955, but I found this in her college records. He slid forward another document. It's her application to UCLA, dated 1973. She would have been 18 if she was born in 1955. Olivia examined the application. The birth date here is also April 10, 1955, but if your mother was Catherine's child born in 1974 or 1975, she couldn't have been in college in 1973. Exactly, unless… Ethan hesitated. Unless she wasn't born in 1955 at all, Olivia finished. Unless she was Catherine. The possibility hung in the air between them. But that would mean my mother lied about being adopted, Ethan said. Why would she do that? Perhaps to hide her past, Olivia suggested. If Catherine ran away and wanted to start over, creating a new identity might have seemed like the best option. Ethan frowned, clearly struggling with the idea. It's hard to imagine my mother living such a fundamental lie. She was the most honest person I knew. Sometimes people lie to protect themselves or others, Olivia said gently, especially when they're young and scared. They continued comparing notes, laying out a timeline of known events. Catherine Lewis disappeared in early 1974, reportedly pregnant. Catherine Morgan began attending UCLA in 1973, according to her academic records, which aligned with the story that she was born in 1955. The timelines still don't quite add up, Olivia said, frustration creeping into her voice. If your mother was my great-aunt, she would have been the same age as the college student in this photo. But then who was the baby she was supposedly pregnant with when she ran away? And if my mother was Catherine's child, born in 1974 or 1975, how could she have been in college in 1973? Ethan added. They sat in silence, both staring at the documents spread before them. Wait, Olivia said suddenly. Let me see that UCLA application again. Ethan slid it across the table. Olivia studied it carefully, then pulled out her phone and enlarged a digital copy of one of Catherine's photos. Look at the signatures, she said, placing the phone next to the application. Catherine Lewis and Catherine Morgan. They're different. Ethan examined both signatures. The handwriting was indeed distinct. Catherine Lewis's signature was flowing and artistic, with a distinctive flourish on the K, while Catherine Morgan's was more controlled and precise. Different people, he said, relief evident in his voice. So my mother wasn't your great-aunt, but that still doesn't explain the identical appearance, same name, and same birthday. No, it doesn't. Olivia pulled out the locket and opened it, showing Ethan the tiny photograph inside. This is definitely Catherine Lewis. The resemblance to your mother is uncanny, but you're right. The signatures suggest they were different people. Ethan reached into his briefcase again. I found this last night tucked into my mother's college yearbook. He handed Olivia a small yellowed newspaper clipping. It's an article about twins separated at birth who found each other in college. My mother had circled it heavily and written, "Could it be?" in the margin. Olivia's eyes widened. You think they were twins? Separated at birth? It would explain the identical appearance, same birthday. It seems more plausible than my mother secretly being your great-aunt. If they were twins, Olivia said slowly, working through the implications, that would mean they were born in 1955, given up for adoption, and raised separately. Catherine Lewis by my great-grandparents, and Catherine Morgan by your grandparents? And they never knew about each other, Ethan added. At least, not until possibly 1974 when your Catherine disappeared. But if they were twins, why would my family raise one but not the other? And why keep it a secret? Olivia frowned, finding holes in the theory. Maybe they didn't know. Maybe the twins were separated before my grandparents adopted my mother. Ethan ran a hand through his hair. This is still incredibly confusing. Olivia nodded, then suddenly stopped. Wait. If your mother and my great-aunt were twins, that would make us… What? Second cousins once removed, I think? Still related, Ethan said quietly, the implication hanging heavy between them. They fell silent again, the weight of disappointment palpable. Olivia tried to focus on the facts, pushing aside her emotions. "I need to talk to my father again," she said finally. "He might know more than he realizes. And we should try to find Catherine Lewis's birth certificate. If she was adopted too, it would confirm our twin theory." "I'll keep going through my mother's papers," Ethan agreed. "There might be more clues there." As they gathered their materials, their hands brushed briefly. Olivia felt the familiar spark, followed by immediate guilt. If they were indeed related, even distantly, these feelings were inappropriate. "Ethan," she began, not quite meeting his eyes, "until we know for sure, maybe we should take a step back," he finished, his voice strained. "I know. It's the sensible thing to do." Outside the cafe, the awkwardness returned. Where they would normally have parted with a kiss, now they stood at an uncomfortable distance, neither sure how to say goodbye. "I'll call you when I find something," Olivia said. "Same here." Ethan hesitated, then added, "Whatever we discover, Olivia, I want you to know these past few months have meant a lot to me." "Me too," she replied softly, before turning and walking quickly to her car, fighting back tears. Over the next few days, Olivia threw herself into research. She visited the county records office, searching for birth certificates and adoption records. She interviewed her elderly great-uncle, her grandmother's brother, hoping he might remember details about Catherine's early life. She even contacted a genetic genealogist, considering the possibility of DNA testing to determine the exact nature of her relationship to Ethan. Each night, she returned home exhausted, her mind full of puzzle pieces that refused to fit together. She and Ethan exchanged brief text messages about their findings, but carefully avoided any personal conversations. The distance between them grew, even as they worked toward the same goal. On the fourth day, Olivia received a call from her father. "I found something," he said without preamble. "I've been talking to my cousin Michael. You met him at Grandma's funeral last year. He's 10 years older than me and remembers more about the family dynamics from the 1970s. "What did he say?" Olivia asked, hope flaring. "He remembers a huge family scandal when he was a teenager around 1974. Not just about Catherine being pregnant, but something else. Something the adults wouldn't discuss in front of the children." Her father paused. "He suggested I ask Aunt Elaine. She was married into the family by then and might have been privy to the adult conversations." "Did you call her?" "I did. And Olivia, what she told me, it changes everything." Olivia's heart raced. "What is it, Dad?" "Catherine wasn't pregnant when she ran away," her father said. "That was a story concocted by my grandparents to explain her sudden disappearance without revealing the truth, which they considered far more shameful." "Then why did she leave?" According to Aunt Elaine, Catherine had discovered something about her birth, specifically that she was adopted. When she confronted my grandparents, they refused to give her any information about her birth parents or circumstances. They had a terrible fight and Catherine left to search for her birth family. Olivia sat down heavily. "Catherine was adopted? My great-grandparents weren't her biological parents?" "No. Apparently they adopted her when she was just a few days old. They never intended for her to find out, which was common thinking back then." "Did Aunt Elaine know anything about Catherine's birth family, or how the adoption was arranged?" "Only rumors. The family story was that Catherine came from a good family who couldn't keep her for some reason. There was mention of a private adoption arranged through the church." Olivia's mind raced, connecting this new information with what they already knew. "Dad, did Aunt Elaine ever hear anything about Catherine having a twin?" Her father was silent for a moment. "You know, now that you mention it, she did say something odd. She said my grandmother once made a comment when drunk at a holiday party, something about how they only took one because that was all they could afford. Elaine always assumed it referred to the adoption, but she never understood the full context." "Only took one," Olivia repeated, her excitement building. "Dad, I think Catherine might have had a twin sister who was adopted by a different family, and I think I may have found her, or rather found her son." "What? How is that possible?" "It's a long story. I'll explain everything soon, I promise. But this information helps enormously. Thank you." After hanging up, Olivia immediately called Ethan, too excited to text. When he answered, she could hear the hope in his voice. "Did you find something?" "Yes," Olivia said, unable to contain her excitement. "Catherine, my Catherine, was adopted. She wasn't biologically related to my family." "What?" The surprise in Ethan's voice was evident. "How did you find out?" "My father talked to my Aunt Elaine. Apparently, Catherine discovered she was adopted in 1974 and ran away to search for her birth family. The pregnancy story was a cover-up invented by my great-grandparents to explain her disappearance." "So she wasn't pregnant," Ethan clarified. "And if she wasn't biologically related to your family, then even if your mother and my great-aunt were twins, you and I wouldn't be blood relatives," Olivia finished, the words rushing out. A heavy silence followed. Olivia could almost hear Ethan processing this information. "We need to meet," he finally said. "I found something too." They agreed to meet at Ethan's apartment in an hour. As Olivia drove there, her mind raced with possibilities. If Catherine Lewis and Catherine Morgan were indeed twins, separated at birth and adopted by different families, it would explain the identical appearance, same birthday, and same name. Perhaps the birth mother had named them both before giving them up, and the adoptive families had chosen to keep the name. When Ethan opened the door, the tension that had characterized their last meeting was replaced by nervous energy. His living room had been transformed into an investigative hub with papers, photographs, and notes covering every surface. "I've been busy," he said, noticing her surprised expression. "I can see that." Ethan led her to the dining table, which held the most organized display of their findings. "After we last spoke, I went through every box of my mother's belongings. I found this in a hidden compartment in her jewelry box." He carefully unfolded a yellowed piece of paper, a letter, written in faded ink. "It's dated September 1974, he explained. "Just after your Catherine disappeared. It's from someone named Sarah Jenkins, to my mother." Olivia leaned forward to read. "Dear Catherine, I hope this letter finds you well. I've thought long and hard about reaching out since our unexpected meeting last month. The shock of finding someone who looks exactly like me, shares my birthday, and even my name is still difficult to process. I've done as you suggested and spoken with the nuns at St. Mary's. Sister Agnes confirmed what we suspected. We are indeed twins, separated at birth. She wouldn't provide details about our birth mother, saying only that she was a good woman in an impossible situation who had hoped we might find each other someday. I understand your reluctance to pursue this further. Your life with your adoptive family sounds complicated, and I respect your decision. As for me, I've decided to continue searching for our birth mother. I feel I need answers that only she can provide. If you ever change your mind or simply wish to know what I discover, you can reach me at the address below. Whatever you decide, I'm grateful that we found each other, however briefly. Your sister, Sarah, though I guess I was almost Catherine too." Olivia looked up, meeting Ethan's gaze. "Sarah Jenkins. Could that be Catherine Lewis using a different name?" Ethan nodded. "That's what I thought too. After she ran away, she might have changed her name to make it harder for her family to find her. But this letter suggests your mother knew about having a twin in 1974 and chose not to pursue the connection." Olivia frowned, trying to piece together the timeline. "My Catherine disappeared in early 1974 after discovering she was adopted. Sometime that year, she apparently met your mother, realized they were twins, and then wrote this letter in September. My mother kept the letter but never mentioned having a twin to me or my father," Ethan said. "At least, not that I know of. Did you find any other correspondence between them?" "No, this is the only letter. But I did find this." Ethan showed her a photograph, clearly from the 1970s based on the fashion and film quality. It showed two identical young women, arms around each other, smiling broadly. On the back was written simply, "Catherine and Sarah, August 1974. "They did meet," Olivia whispered, staring at the image of the twins. "They found each other. Briefly, it seems. According to the letter, they parted ways after confirming they were twins. Sarah, or Catherine Lewis, continued searching for their birth mother, while my mother chose not to pursue it." Olivia felt a surge of excitement. This confirms our theory. They were twins, separated at birth, adopted by different families. But it still doesn't explain what happened after. My family was told Catherine died a few years after she ran away. Your mother continued her life, eventually becoming an art historian, marrying, having you, and apparently never reconnecting with her twin, Ethan added, a note of sadness in his voice. "We need to find out if Catherine Lewis really did die, or if that was another family fiction." Olivia pulled out her phone. "I'm going to call my cousin Michael. He mentioned receiving a letter about Catherine's death." While Olivia made the call, Ethan continued organizing their evidence. From Olivia's side of the conversation, he gathered that Michael was searching for the letter in question and would call back once he found it. "He's looking through his mother's papers," Olivia explained after hanging up. "He remembers the letter coming around 1977, but isn't sure of the exact date." 3 years after the twins met, Ethan mused. "I wonder what happened in that time. This letter mentions St. Mary's. Was that where your mother was born?" "Yes, St. Mary's Home for Unwed Mothers. It was run by nuns, as the letter says." Ethan tapped his fingers thoughtfully on the table. It closed in the 1980s, but the diocesan archives might have records. "It's worth checking. Can we visit the archives tomorrow?" "I know the archivist. I've done research there for restoration projects. I'll call him." As they continued piecing together the puzzle, the awkwardness that had pervaded their previous meeting gradually dissolved. The possibility that they weren't related after all lifted an enormous weight, allowing the natural chemistry between them to re-emerge. "You know," Ethan said as they took a break for dinner, ordered from their favorite Thai restaurant, "part of me is still processing all this. A month ago, my biggest concern was restoring the original moldings at Westfield House. Now I'm discovering my mother had a secret twin sister." "Life can change so quickly," Olivia agreed, picking up a spring roll. "When I fixed your laptop that day, I never imagined we'd end up investigating a family mystery together." "Do you regret it?" Ethan asked, his expression suddenly serious. "Getting involved with me, I mean." Olivia considered the question. "No," she said finally. "Even with all the complications, I don't regret a moment of our time together." The honesty in her voice seemed to touch Ethan deeply. He reached across the table, taking her hand in his. "I've missed you these past few days. The possibility that we might be related was difficult to process." "For me too," Olivia admitted. "I kept thinking about all our moments together, trying to reconcile them with the idea that you might be my cousin. And now? Now I'm cautiously optimistic that we're just two people whose family histories intersected in an extraordinary way." Before Ethan could respond, Olivia's phone rang, Michael calling back. "I found it," he said when she answered. "The letter about Catherine's death. It's dated March 15, 1977, from a lawyer named James Patterson in San Francisco." "What exactly does it say?" Olivia asked, putting the call on speaker so Ethan could hear. "It's very formal, addressed to my grandparents. It says something like, 'It is my duty to inform you that Catherine Lewis passed away on March 3, 1977, due to complications following an automobile accident. As per her wishes, she was cremated and a private memorial service was held. She asked that her personal effects be donated to charity with the exception of the enclosed item, which she wanted returned to her family.'" "Was anything enclosed with the letter?" Olivia asked. "Yes, the silver locket you showed me, the one your grandmother gave Catherine for her 16th birthday." Olivia exchanged a significant look with Ethan. Does the letter mention anyone else? A husband, a child, a twin sister? No, it's very brief. Just the information about her death and the locket. Can you send me a photo of the letter, including the law firm's letterhead? Sure, give me a minute. While they waited, Ethan pulled up his laptop. I'm going to search for James Patterson, attorney, San Francisco, 1977. The photo of the letter arrived just as Ethan's search yielded results. James Patterson was real, Ethan said, scanning the search results. He was a probate attorney in San Francisco from 1965 to 1999. Died in 2008. Olivia examined the letter photo. The letterhead looks legitimate, but it's strange that there's so little information. No mention of where she was living, what she was doing in San Francisco, who was with her when she died. It could have been written that way intentionally to provide closure to the family without revealing details Catherine didn't want shared, Ethan suggested. Or Olivia hesitated, a new possibility forming in her mind. What if she didn't die at all? What if the letter was fabricated to give her a clean break from her past? Ethan considered this. You think she faked her death? That seems extreme. Maybe, but it would explain the vagueness of the letter. And the return of the locket is a nice touch, a sentimental gesture to provide emotional closure. But why would she go to such lengths? Her adoptive parents already thought she had run away. Why not just stay gone? Olivia thought about it. Perhaps she found something in her search for her birth mother, something that made her want to completely erase her old identity. Like what? I don't know. But tomorrow, when we visit the diocesan archives, we might find out. They spent the rest of the evening organizing their findings and preparing questions for the archivist. As the night grew late, Olivia realized she should leave, though she was reluctant to break the renewed connection between them. It's getting late, she said finally, gathering her notes. I should go. Ethan walked her to the door. I'll pick you up tomorrow morning for the archives visit. At the doorway they paused, the air between them charged with unspoken feelings. The distance they had maintained since discovering the possibility of a family connection had been necessary, but painful. Ethan, Olivia began, not quite sure what she wanted to say. He stepped closer, his expression a mixture of hope and restraint. I know we should still be careful until we know for sure, but... But? She prompted, her heart racing. But I've missed you terribly, he admitted, and I'm finding it hard to remember why we're keeping our distance. Olivia smiled softly. The logical part of my brain keeps reminding me that we don't have definitive proof yet. And what does the rest of your brain say? That logic isn't everything. Ethan reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear in a gesture reminiscent of their early days together. One step at a time? One step at a time, she agreed, leaning slightly into his touch. When he leaned forward to kiss her, she met him halfway, allowing herself to hope that the connection they had found, both literal and figurative, would survive the revelations still to come. The diocesan archives occupied the basement of St. Michael's Cathedral, a Gothic revival structure that had stood in the heart of the city for over a century. The space smelled of old paper and wood polish, with rows of filing cabinets and bookshelves organized with meticulous care. Father Thomas, the elderly archivist, greeted Ethan with a warm handshake. "Mr. Morgan, always a pleasure, and this must be Ms. James." He turned to Olivia with a gentle smile. "Ethan mentioned you're researching a family connection to St. Mary's home." "Yes, Father. We're trying to trace the adoption of twins born there in April 1955, Olivia explained. "Adoption records are sensitive matters," Father Thomas said, leading them to a small research room. Traditionally, they were kept sealed to protect all parties involved. However, our diocese has become more open in recent years about connecting adoptees with information about their origins within certain parameters. "We understand the sensitivity," Ethan assured him. "My mother was one of the twins we're researching. She passed away several years ago. Father Thomas nodded sympathetically. I see. Well, let me see what records we have from St. Mary's for that period. The home closed in 1986, and all their files were transferred here. While the priest disappeared into the archives, Ethan and Olivia set up their notes on the wooden table. The anticipation of potentially finding answers had kept them both awake much of the night. Are you nervous? Olivia asked, noticing Ethan's restless fingers tapping against the table. A bit, he admitted. I keep thinking about my mother, wondering if she would want me doing this. She clearly made a choice not to pursue her birth family or maintain contact with her twin. People make decisions based on their circumstances at the time, Olivia said thoughtfully. Maybe she felt it was best then, but would feel differently now. Or maybe learning about her origins would give you insights into health concerns or family traits that could be important. That's true. Ethan's expression softened. Besides, I think she'd understand my curiosity. She always encouraged my interest in history and uncovering stories from the past. Father Thomas returned carrying a large bound ledger and several file folders. This is the birth registry from St. Mary's for 1955, he explained, setting the ledger on the table. And these are the corresponding case files for April of that year. He opened the ledger to a page marked with a slip of paper. Here we are, April 10th, 1955. There was indeed a birth of twin girls that day. His finger traced the line of flowing script. Mother listed as Margaret Ryan, age 22. No father recorded. The twins were given the names Catherine and Sarah. Olivia and Ethan exchanged excited glances. Catherine and Sarah, Ethan repeated. So they were named by their birth mother, not their adoptive families. That's quite common, Father Thomas said. Many birth mothers named their children, even knowing they would be adopted. It was often their only lasting connection. Is there any information about Margaret Ryan? Olivia asked. Where she was from? What happened to her after the birth? Father Thomas opened one of the file folders. The case notes are limited. She arrived at St. Mary's in January 1955, already 6 months pregnant. She was from… this is interesting. She was from Maplewood. Where my grandparents' first home was, Olivia said, remembering the photograph she had shown Ethan months earlier. The notes indicate she was unmarried and unable to care for the children. Her parents had apparently disowned her when they learned of the pregnancy. Father Thomas turned a page in the file. The twins were scheduled for adoption through Catholic charities. The interesting part is that they were initially meant to be adopted together. What changed? Ethan asked. According to this note from Sister Agnes, she was the administrator at St. Mary's for many years. The couple who had agreed to adopt both girls experienced a financial setback just before the adoption was to be finalized. They could only afford to take one child. The priest looked up. It was Catherine who went to the original couple. Sarah was placed with a different family a few weeks later. Do you have the names of the adoptive families? Olivia asked, her heart racing. Father Thomas checked the file again. Catherine was adopted by James and Eleanor Morgan on April 30th, 1955. My grandparents, Ethan confirmed, and Sarah was adopted by Robert and Mary Lewis on May 18, 1955. My great-grandparents, Olivia whispered. So that confirms it. They were twins, separated at birth, given to different families. But both kept their original first names, Ethan noted. That's why they were both named Catherine. The Lewis family seems to have changed Sarah's name to Catherine, Father Thomas observed, reading further. There's a note here that they specifically requested to use that name instead of Sarah, though no reason is given. Is there any information about what happened to Margaret Ryan after she gave birth? Olivia asked. Father Thomas flipped through the file. Not much. She stayed at St. Mary's for 2 weeks after the delivery, then left. The last entry notes that she planned to move to Chicago to stay with a cousin. He closed the file with a gentle sigh. Many of these young women simply disappear from the records after giving up their children. It was a different time, with different expectations. "Is there any way to trace her?" Ethan asked. "She would be in her early 90s now if she's still alive." "Without more information, it would be quite difficult," Father Thomas admitted. "Margaret Ryan is a very common name, and people from that era didn't leave the digital footprints we do today. However," he tapped the file thoughtfully, "Sister Agnes maintained her own detailed records, beyond the official ones. She had a reputation for keeping in touch with many of the women who passed through St. Mary's. When she retired, her personal papers were donated to our archives. They might contain additional information." "Could we see those papers?" Olivia asked eagerly. "They haven't been fully catalogued yet, I'm afraid. They're stored in the back section of the archives." Father Thomas checked his watch. "I have a meeting shortly, but you're welcome to look through them. I'll show you where they're kept before I go." The priest led them deeper into the archives, to a section of metal shelving filled with cardboard boxes labeled simply Senior Agnes, Personal Papers, followed by year ranges. "The 1950s would be in these boxes," Father Thomas indicated. "Feel free to look through them, but please keep everything in order. I should be back in about 2 hours." Left alone among the archives, Olivia and Ethan set to work methodically examining the contents of each box from the mid-1950s. Sister Agnes had kept meticulous records, handwritten notes about the women who came to St. Mary's, correspondence with adoptive families, and even occasional updates she received years after the adoptions were completed. "Look at this," Olivia said after nearly an hour of searching. "It's a letter from Sister Agnes to Margaret Ryan, dated December 1955, sent to an address in Chicago." She read aloud, "My dear Margaret, I hope this letter finds you well. I think of you often and pray that you have found peace in your new life. The twins are thriving in their adoptive homes, though it saddens me that they could not stay together as we had planned." "She kept in touch with her," Ethan said, moving closer to read over Olivia's shoulder. "Is there a response?" Olivia flipped through the papers. "Yes, here, dated January 1956. She scanned the letter. "Margaret thanks Sister Agnes for the update and says she's working as a secretary at an insurance company in Chicago. She asks about the twins, but says she knows it's best not to interfere in their lives." They continued searching, finding sporadic correspondence between Sister Agnes and Margaret Ryan throughout the late 1950s and 1960s. The letters revealed a woman who had rebuilt her life but never stopped thinking about the daughters she had given up. In a letter from 1965, Margaret wrote, "I've never married, Sister. Perhaps that's my penance. Sometimes I imagine the girls, they would be 10 now, and wonder if they look like me, if they have my love of music or my terrible sweet tooth. I know I made the right decision for them, but the wondering never stops." "This is heartbreaking," Olivia murmured. "She gave them up because she had to, not because she wanted to." "Different times," Ethan said softly. An unmarried mother in the 1950s had few options, especially if her family had rejected her. In a box containing papers from the early 1970s, they found what they had been hoping for, a letter from Margaret Ryan dated June 1973 with a return address in San Francisco. "She moved to California," Olivia noted, carefully opening the yellowed envelope. The letter inside was longer than the previous ones, the handwriting more hurried, as if written in a state of emotional agitation. "Dear Sister Agnes," Olivia read, "I hope this letter finds you well. I'm writing with an important request. As you know, the twins will turn 18 next April. I have respected the closed adoption all these years, never attempting to contact them or interfere in their lives. However, as this milestone approaches, I find myself increasingly unable to live with the emptiness their absence has left in my life. I understand the agreements that were signed and the promises made, but I wonder if, now that they will be legal adults, there might be a way to let them know that should they ever wish to find me, I would welcome contact. Perhaps a letter could be forwarded to their adoptive families, leaving the choice in their hands. I have enclosed 2 sealed letters, one for each of my daughters, along with my current contact information. I leave it to your discretion whether to send them. Whatever you decide, please know that you have been a source of comfort to me over these long years of separation. Yours in faith, Margaret Ryan. Ethan looked through the remaining papers in the folder. The enclosed letters aren't here. Do you think Sister Agnes forwarded them? Olivia continued reading through the file. Here's a draft of Sister Agnes's response. She says she'll hold the letters until the twins turn 18, then attempt to forward them to the adoptive families, though she cautions that it will be up to them whether to share the letters with the girls. So, in April 1973, both Catherine Morgan and Catherine Lewis would have potentially received letters from their birth mother, Ethan said, thinking aloud. My mother never mentioned receiving such a letter, but then she never told me she was adopted either. And my Catherine ran away in early 1974 after discovering she was adopted, Olivia added. I wonder if the letter from Margaret was what prompted her to look into her adoption in the first place. It's possible. Ethan pulled out another folder labeled 1974-1975. If Sister Agnes kept copies of her correspondence, there might be something here about what happened next. They searched through the 1974 papers, finding several more letters between Sister Agnes and Margaret Ryan. In April 1974, Margaret wrote with excitement that Catherine Lewis, the twin adopted by the Lewis family, had contacted her. She is everything I could have hoped for, sister, Olivia read from the letter. Intelligent, compassionate, with such a bright spirit. She looks so much like me at that age. She tells me she has left home after a disagreement with her adoptive parents and is staying with me while she decides what to do next. She wants to find her sister, and I am helping her search. Is there any information you can provide about the Morgan family that might help us locate them? Sister Agnes's reply to Margaret was cautious but helpful. She explained that she couldn't officially provide information about the Morgan family, but mentioned that they had moved from Chicago to Los Angeles when Catherine Morgan was 12. She included the name of the parish they had attended in Chicago, suggesting it might provide a starting point for the search. So Catherine Lewis found her birth mother, moved in with her, and they began searching for the other twin together, Olivia summarized, carefully arranging the letters in chronological order. And eventually, they found her, Ethan said, referring to the photograph they had discovered at his apartment, the one showing the twins together in August 1974. They continued through the files, finding a jubilant letter from Margaret dated September 1974, describing the twins' reunion. It was like witnessing a miracle, sister. Catherine and Catherine, though my Morgan girl now goes by Kate to avoid confusion, meeting for the first time since infancy. They sat for hours just staring at each other, finishing each other's sentences, discovering all their similarities and differences, both artistic, though in different ways. Catherine pursuing visual arts while Kate leaned toward the academic study of art history, both drawn to old buildings and historic places, both with my unruly curls and their father's dark eyes. There it is, Ethan said. Their father. This is the first mention of him in any of the letters. Olivia nodded, continuing to read. Kate seemed more reserved about the whole situation. While Catherine has embraced me as her mother, Kate maintains a certain distance. She is polite but guarded, and she speaks of her adoptive parents with great loyalty and love. I understand her reluctance. The Morgans gave her a stable, loving home, and she feels that embracing me would somehow betray them. Still, I cherish the brief time the three of us had together, even knowing Kate has decided not to maintain ongoing contact. Catherine was heartbroken by her sister's decision, but she respects it. She will be staying with me in San Francisco, taking art classes at the community college. We are building the relationship we never had the chance to develop, and for that, I am profoundly grateful. Ethan was quiet for a moment after Olivia finished reading. My mother chose to go back to her life with the Morgans, he said finally, to maintain the identity she had always known. While Catherine chose to stay with her birth mother and forge a new identity, Olivia added, two different responses to the same revelation. They searched through more files tracking the correspondence through 1975 and 1976. Margaret's letters spoke warmly of her life with Catherine, who was flourishing in art school and had begun exhibiting her paintings locally. There were occasional mentions of Kate, always respectful of her decision to maintain distance, but noting that Catherine still hoped her twin would someday change her mind. Then, in a letter dated February 1977, the tone changed dramatically. Dear Sister Agnes, I write with a heavy heart. Catherine has been in a terrible car accident. The doctors are not optimistic. She suffered severe head trauma and has been unconscious for 3 days. I am at her bedside day and night praying for a miracle. I have tried to contact Kate to let her know, but my letters have gone unanswered. If you have any way to reach her, please tell her that her sister needs her. In desperation, Margaret, Olivia, and Ethan looked at each other, the implication clear. This accident aligned with the timing of the letter Olivia's family had received about Catherine's death in March 1977. The next letter, dated March 5, 1977, confirmed their suspicions. Sister Agnes, my beautiful Catherine passed away on March 3rd, never having regained consciousness. The pain is unbearable. I have lost her twice now, first as an infant when I was forced to give her up, and now permanently just as we were building the life together we should have always had. Kate still has not responded to my messages. Perhaps it is better this way. She has her own life, her own family. Why should she share in this grief? I am making arrangements for a small memorial service. Catherine had few friends here, having dedicated most of her time to her art and to our relationship. After the service, I'm not sure what I will do. This apartment holds too many memories now. I feel I must inform Catherine's adoptive family of her passing, though she had cut ties with them. Would you advise me on the most compassionate way to do this? In sorrow, Margaret. So she really did die, Olivia said softly. It wasn't a fake death after all. And the letter your family received likely came from the lawyer Margaret hired to notify them, Ethan added. They scanned through the remaining letters, which grew increasingly sparse. Margaret wrote of her struggle with grief, her eventual decision to move to a small coastal town north of San Francisco, her attempts to find meaning by volunteering at a local art center. The last letter in the files was dated 1982, in which Margaret thanked Sister Agnes for her years of support and mentioned that her health was declining due to heart problems. Do you think she's still alive? Olivia asked, carefully returning the letters to their folder. She'd be in her early 90s now, Ethan said. It's possible, though, the heart problems she mentioned in 1982 don't sound encouraging. We should try to find out. She's the last person alive who knew both Catherines, who could tell us more about them and their brief time together. Ethan nodded, then suddenly remembered something. Wait, there's one more box we haven't checked. 1975-1980. He retrieved it from the shelf and began searching through the contents. Here's something, he said after a few minutes. It's not a letter, but a newspaper clipping from a San Francisco art magazine, dated January 1977. He carefully unfolded the yellowed paper. It's about an exhibition of emerging artists featuring Catherine Lewis. There's a photograph. He stopped abruptly, staring at the image. Olivia moved to look over his shoulder and gasped. The photograph showed a young woman in her early 20s standing beside a large abstract painting. Though the image was grainy, the resemblance to Ethan's mother and to Olivia's great-aunt in the family photos was unmistakable. She looks so much like them, Olivia murmured. It's not just that, Ethan said, his voice tight with emotion. Look at the painting. Olivia examined the artwork visible in the photograph. It was an abstract piece dominated by swirling shapes that vaguely suggested a human figure in motion. Despite the black and white reproduction, the composition was striking, powerful yet delicate, with a sense of longing in the reaching forms. "It's beautiful," she said. She was clearly talented. "Liv." Ethan's use of the nickname, which he had coined early in their relationship but hadn't used since their investigation began, caught her attention. "I've seen this painting before. I grew up with it." "What?" "This exact painting hung in our living room my entire childhood. My mother always said it was by an obscure artist she discovered in graduate school. It was her favorite piece." Olivia stared at him in disbelief. "Your mother had her twin sister's painting in your home? But I thought she cut contact with her." "That's what these letters suggest, but—" Ethan shook his head, confused. Maybe she changed her mind later? Or kept tabs on Catherine secretly? They searched more urgently through the box, finding another newspaper clipping from March 1977. A small obituary for Catherine Lewis, noting her passing after a car accident and mentioning that she was survived by her mother, Margaret Ryan, and her twin sister, Catherine Morgan. "So it was public knowledge that they were twins," Olivia observed. "The obituary specifically mentions your mother, which means my mother must have known about Catherine's death, even if she didn't attend the funeral or maintain contact with Margaret afterward." As they continued searching, Father Thomas returned, looking pleased to find them still engrossed in their research. "Any success?" he asked. "More than we expected," Ethan replied, giving the priest a brief summary of what they had discovered. "Remarkable," Father Thomas said. "Sister Agnes was known for her compassion and her commitment to the women and children who passed through St. Mary's. I'm not surprised she maintained such detailed records." "Father, do you know if there's any way to trace what happened to Margaret Ryan after 1982? Olivia asked. "The correspondence ends then, but we'd like to find out if she's still alive." The priest considered this. "The diocese might have records if she remained active in the church, and Sister Agnes herself lived until 2010. Her later papers might contain more recent information." "Could we look at those as well?" Ethan asked. "Of course, though it would take time to locate them. They're stored in a different section of the archives." Father Thomas glanced at his watch. "I'm afraid we're closing soon for the day, but you're welcome to return tomorrow." After thanking the priest and carefully returning all materials to their proper places, Ethan and Olivia stepped out of the cathedral into the late afternoon sunlight, both feeling overwhelmed by all they had learned. "My mother had her twins painting," Ethan said as they walked to the car, still processing this revelation. "All those years it was hanging in our house and she never said a word about who really painted it. Maybe it was her way of keeping her sister close, even if she couldn't bring herself to maintain an actual relationship," Olivia suggested. "Or maybe there's more to the story than what we've found so far." Ethan unlocked the car but didn't immediately get in. "I keep thinking about what came after Catherine died, after that last letter in 1982. What happened to Margaret? Did my mother ever reconnect with her?" "There's only one way to find out," Olivia said. "We need to trace Margaret's whereabouts after 1982. And I need to go through more of my mother's papers. If she kept her twins painting, she might have kept other things too. Letters, photographs, something that would explain why she made the choices she did." They drove to Ethan's apartment in contemplative silence, each absorbed in their own thoughts about the story that was unfolding before them. When they arrived, Ethan immediately went to the hall closet and pulled out several more boxes of his mother's belongings. "I haven't been able to bring myself to go through most of these since she died," he admitted. "It was too painful. But now you need answers," Olivia finished, understanding perfectly. They worked methodically, sorting through Catherine Morgan's personal effects, old photographs, academic papers, journals, and mementos from her travels. In a box labeled simply "Personal," they found a leather-bound journal with entries spanning from 1974 to 1978, exactly the period when Catherine had discovered her twin, met her briefly, and then lost her. The journal entries were sporadic but revealing. In August 1974, Catherine wrote of meeting her twin and birth mother. It was like looking in a mirror, but one that reflected not just my appearance but a road not taken. Catherine is everything I'm not, free-spirited, emotional, artistic in a way I've only ever appreciated academically. Margaret, I cannot bring myself to call her mother, was loving but overwhelming in her desire to connect. I felt suffocated by their expectations, their instant acceptance of this new reality. I have a family, the one that raised me, supported me, loved me. How can I simply set that aside for these strangers who share my blood? In later entries, she expressed guilt over cutting contact but reaffirmed her decision to maintain her existing life and identity. Then, in March 1977, a heartbreaking entry. Catherine is gone. The call came from Margaret today. A car accident, a coma, then death. My twin, my blood, the other half of me that I pushed away out of fear and loyalty to my adoptive parents. I told no one about the call. What would I say? How do I mourn someone I deliberately removed from my life? The guilt is crushing. I should have been there. I should have known her better. Now it's too late. Olivia looked up from the journal, seeing the pain on Ethan's face as he read over her shoulder. She regretted her decision, she said softly. She was mourning in secret. And look at this entry from June 1977. Ethan pointed to a passage further down the page. I went to San Francisco last weekend ostensibly for research at the archives there. My real purpose was to visit Margaret and to see Catherine's art. Margaret was surprised but welcomed me with open arms as if I'd never rejected them. Catherine's studio was untouched, her paintings, her brushes, even the half-finished canvas on her easel. Margaret insisted I take one of Catherine's paintings, saying my twin would have wanted me to have it. I chose the abstract she was most proud of, the one that was featured in the exhibition shortly before her accident. When I returned home, I told Richard it was by an obscure artist I'd discovered during my research, another lie to add to all the others I've told. Richard was my father, Ethan explained, so she did reconnect with Margaret, at least briefly. And she took the painting as a way to keep her twin's memory alive, Olivia added. They continued reading through the journal, discovering that Catherine Morgan had maintained intermittent contact with Margaret Ryan over the following years, visiting occasionally, but always keeping these visits separate from her life with her husband and eventually her son. The final entry mentioning Margaret was dated 1995. Visited M in Seaview yesterday. Her health is deteriorating, but her spirits remain strong. She showed me Catherine's last sketchbook, which I'd never seen before. The final drawings were of me, based on the photograph we took together that single day we spent as sisters. Even after I pushed her away, she was still drawing me, still holding on to the connection I tried to sever. M asked if I would take the sketchbook, but I couldn't. Some reminders are too painful, even after all these years. Seaview, Ethan murmured, looking up from the journal. That's a small coastal town about 3 hours north of San Francisco. If Margaret was there in 1995, she could still be there now. Olivia finished, the possibility hanging between them. They spent the rest of the evening researching Seaview, a picturesque town of less than 5,000 residents nestled along the Northern California coast. Through online searches, they found several Margaret Ryans in the area over the years, but without more specific information, it was impossible to determine if any of them was the woman they sought. We need to go there, Olivia said finally. It's the only way to know for sure. Ethan nodded, his expression a mixture of hope and apprehension. I can take a few days off from the Westfield restoration. Richardson can handle the final details on the exterior work. And I can work remotely for a couple of days. Olivia hesitated, then added, Are you sure you want to do this? Finding Margaret means confronting parts of your mother's life she chose to keep hidden. I'm sure, Ethan said, his resolve strengthening. My whole life, I thought I knew who my mother was. Now I realize there was this entire other dimension to her, sister, twin, daughter, that she never shared. I need to understand why. They made arrangements quickly, booking flights to San Francisco for the following afternoon and reserving a rental car for the drive to Seaview. Olivia took the morning to brief her team at Nexus on the projects they would need to handle in her absence, while Ethan coordinated with his colleagues at the restoration site. On the plane, they finalized their plan. They would start by visiting the local historical society and library, places where a woman interested in art history might have left a trace. If that yielded nothing, they would try the art center that Margaret had mentioned volunteering at, and finally, check with churches and residential facilities that might have records of an elderly resident. As their rental car wound along the coastal highway toward Seaview, Olivia watched the Pacific Ocean stretching endlessly to the west, its waters shifting from deep blue to silver as the afternoon light played across the surface. The beauty was breathtaking, and she could understand why someone seeking peace after loss might settle in such a place. "What do you think she'll be like?" Olivia asked, breaking the contemplative silence. "If we find her, I mean." Ethan kept his eyes on the winding road. "I've been wondering that myself. She'd be in her early 90s now. If she's still alive, will she even be lucid enough to talk to us? To remember? And if she is, how will she feel about seeing you, her grandchild she never knew?" "I don't know." Ethan's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "Part of me is afraid she'll reject me, just as my mother initially rejected her." Olivia placed her hand gently on his arm. "Your mother eventually reached out, though. She maintained some connection, even if it was complicated." "True." Ethan managed a small smile. "As Maya told you months ago, relationships are messy. Even family ones. Especially family ones, maybe." They arrived in Seaview as the sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the Victorian buildings that lined the main street. The town had a timeless quality, with well-preserved historic architecture, small locally owned shops, and a distinct absence of chain stores or modern development. "It feels like stepping back in time," Olivia observed as they checked into the Seaview Inn, a charming bed and breakfast housed in a restored captain's mansion. After settling into their room, they walked to a nearby restaurant for dinner, discussing their search strategy for the following day. They agreed to start with the Seaview Historical Society, which according to their research maintained archives on local residents and businesses. The Historical Society occupied a small Queen Anne cottage just off the main street. Its curator, a cheerful woman in her 60s named Barbara, greeted them warmly when they arrived the next morning. "Margaret Ryan," she repeated when they explained their search. "The name certainly sounds familiar, but we have so many seasonal residents and visitors over the years. What can you tell me about her?" "She would be in her early 90s now," Ethan explained. "She moved here sometime in the late 1970s or early 1980s after her daughter died. She had an interest in art. She might have volunteered at a local art center." Barbara's expression brightened with recognition. "Oh, you must mean Maggie from the Arts Guild. Lovely woman, very knowledgeable about art history. She was a fixture there for years, curating exhibits and mentoring young artists." Olivia and Ethan exchanged excited glances. "That sounds like her," Olivia said. "Do you know if she's still in town? Or still alive?" "Oh yes. Maggie's still with us, though she moved to Ocean View Assisted Living about 5 years ago when her health began to decline. Her mind is still sharp as a tack, but her heart isn't what it used to be." Barbara smiled kindly. "Are you family?" "I believe I'm her grandson," Ethan said, the words feeling strange on his tongue. "My mother was Catherine Morgan, her daughter's twin sister." Barbara's eyes widened. "Well, I'll be. Maggie mentioned having a daughter who died young, but I never knew there was a twin. Or a grandson." She studied Ethan's face. "Though now that you say it, I can see a resemblance around the eyes." Armed with directions to Ocean View Assisted Living, Ethan and Olivia thanked Barbara and set off, both feeling a mounting sense of anticipation. The facility was perched on a bluff overlooking the ocean, its modern architecture designed to maximize views of the coastline. At the reception desk, they explained their connection to Margaret Ryan. The administrator, after checking with Margaret first, led them to a sunny common room with large windows framing the spectacular ocean view. Seated in a comfortable armchair facing the windows was an elderly woman, her silver hair arranged in a neat bob, her thin frame wrapped in a soft blue cardigan despite the warmth of the day. When she turned at their approach, Olivia was struck by the brightness of her dark eyes, alert and intelligent, set in a face lined with age but still bearing traces of the beauty she must have possessed in her youth. "Ms. Ryan," the administrator said gently, "these are the visitors I mentioned, Ethan Morgan and Olivia James." Margaret studied them intently, her gaze lingering on Ethan's face. "You have her eyes," she said finally, her voice soft but clear. "Catherine's eyes. Both Catherines had those same eyes." Ethan stepped forward, emotion making his voice rough. "You knew my mother." "I did." A smile touched Margaret's lips. "Not as well as I would have liked, but yes, I knew her. And you must be her son." "Yes, I'm Ethan." Margaret gestured to the chairs beside her. "Please sit. I've been waiting a long time for this day, though I had almost given up hope it would come." As they settled into the chairs, the administrator discreetly withdrew, leaving them to their reunion. For a moment, no one spoke, the rhythmic sound of waves breaking on the shore below filling the silence. "I don't quite know where to begin," Ethan admitted. "The beginning is usually a good place," Margaret said, her eyes crinkling with gentle humor. "Though in this case, I suppose the beginning was quite some time ago. April 10th, 1955? "We know about the twins," Olivia said. "We found the records at St. Mary's and Sister Agnes's correspondence." "Ah, Sister Agnes." Margaret's expression softened with fond remembrance. "A good woman. She helped me keep track of my girls over the years, at least until Catherine died. After that," she sighed. "Well, after that, everything changed." Over the next hour, Margaret filled in the gaps in their knowledge, her clear recollection belying her advanced age. She spoke of her heartbreak at being forced to give up her twins, of the years spent rebuilding her life while never forgetting the daughters she had lost, of her joy when Catherine Lewis found her, and her complicated feelings when Catherine Morgan initially rejected their connection. "She came to me after her sister died," Margaret explained, her eyes distant with memory. "She was consumed with guilt for not accepting me sooner, for refusing to maintain contact with her twin. The painting she took that day was Catherine's favorite work. I think, Kate, that's what I called your mother, to distinguish between them. I think she took it as a form of penance, a daily reminder of what she had lost through her own choice." "She kept it secret her whole life," Ethan said, still struggling to reconcile this hidden history with the mother he thought he knew. "She never told my father, never told me about any of this. Your mother was a very private person, very controlled. I think the discovery of her adoption, of me, of her twin, it threatened the careful order she had constructed for her life." Margaret reached out a frail hand to touch Ethan's arm. "But she did visit me, you know. Not often. Perhaps once a year or so. She would come alone, never bringing your father or you. I think she needed to keep these parts of her life separate to make sense of them." "Did she ever explain why?" Olivia asked gently. "Why she couldn't embrace this part of her identity?" Margaret considered the question. "She said once that she felt torn between two loyalties, to the parents who raised her, who she loved deeply, and to the blood connection she couldn't deny. By keeping these worlds separate, she felt she was honoring both." She sighed. "I didn't agree with her choice, but I respected it. It was better than no connection at all." "When was the last time you saw her?" Ethan asked. "About a year before she died. She came here, told me about her cancer diagnosis, said she wanted to make peace with everything before the end. Margaret's eyes filled with tears. She asked my forgiveness for all the years of distance, as if there was anything to forgive. They talked until Margaret grew tired, sharing stories and filling in the blanks in each other's understanding. She showed them photographs she had kept, of Catherine Lewis with her artwork, of the brief reunion between the twins, and a few precious images of Catherine Morgan during her secretive visits over the years. "Would you like to see Catherine's sketchbook?" Margaret asked as their visit drew to a close. "The one your mother couldn't bring herself to take?" At Ethan's nod, she directed them to a cabinet in the corner of the room. Inside, carefully preserved in a protective sleeve, was a worn sketchbook filled with Catherine Lewis's drawings, landscapes, still lifes, and portraits, including several of her twin sister based on their brief time together. "I'd like you to have it," Margaret said. "It belongs with family." Ethan accepted the sketchbook with reverent hands. "Thank you for this and for sharing your memories." As they prepared to leave, Margaret held Ethan's hand between her fragile ones. "Your mother loved you very much. Whatever secrets she kept, whatever divisions she maintained in her life, never doubt that." "I won't," he promised, his voice thick with emotion. Outside, as they walked back to their car under a star-filled sky, Olivia slipped her hand into Ethan's. "Are you okay?" "I think so." He glanced down at the sketchbook he carried. "It's a lot to process, but I'm glad we came. Glad we found her." "So am I." They drove back to the inn in comfortable silence, each absorbing the day's revelations. In their room, Ethan carefully went through Catherine Lewis's sketchbook, pausing at a particularly striking portrait of his mother as a young woman, her expression serious but with a hint of vulnerability in her eyes. "She captured something essential about her," he murmured. "Something I recognize from my own memories." "They were connected, even in their separation," Olivia observed, sitting beside him on the bed. "Like puzzle pieces that fit together even at a distance." Ethan closed the sketchbook gently. "Thank you for being here with me, for helping me uncover all of this." "I wouldn't have missed it," Olivia said simply. In the soft lamplight, Ethan turned to face her fully. "When we first thought we might be related, it was like the ground disappeared beneath my feet. Not just because of what it meant for us, but because it meant questioning everything I thought I knew about myself and my family. And now? Now I realize that family is both simpler and more complicated than I ever imagined. Blood matters, but so do the connections we choose, the people we decide to let into our lives and keep there." He took her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "I'm choosing you, Olivia, if you'll still have me after all this chaos." Olivia smiled, leaning forward to kiss him softly. "I think we've established that I'm pretty good at fixing chaos." They spent another day in Seaview, visiting Margaret again and exploring the coastal town she had made her home. Before leaving, they promised to return soon, to maintain the connection that had been severed between generations and was now renewed. Back in their city, life gradually resumed its normal rhythms but with subtle differences. Ethan completed the exterior restoration of the Westfield house, incorporating some of the insights he had gained from Catherine Lewis's artistic perspective, which he had come to know through her sketchbook. Olivia integrated elements of historical preservation into her AI work, creating algorithms that could help digitally reconstruct and archive endangered historic buildings. On a warm Saturday evening 6 months after their trip to Seaview, Ethan invited Olivia to his apartment for dinner. When she arrived, she noticed that he had rearranged his living room. The painting, Catherine Lewis's abstract that had hung in his childhood home, now occupied a place of honor on the main wall. "I wanted it to be the first thing you see," he explained, coming to stand beside her, "a reminder of how we found each other, of the connection that brought us together." "It's beautiful," Olivia said, studying the swirling forms with new appreciation. "Knowing who painted it, knowing the story behind it makes it even more meaningful." "I've been thinking about that a lot, how meaning comes from connection, from understanding the stories behind things, behind people. Ethan took her hand, drawing her attention from the painting to his face. I love you, Olivia. Not just because of how our histories intertwined, but because of who you are. Brilliant, compassionate, determined to solve puzzles and fix what's broken. I love you too, she replied, the words coming easily now. For your passion about preserving the past, your kindness, your willingness to face difficult truths. He led her to the sofa, where a small wrapped package waited. I have something for you. Olivia carefully opened it to find a silver locket, identical to the one that had belonged to Catherine Lewis. Inside was a tiny photograph of the two of them, taken during their visit with Margaret. To mark our connection, Ethan explained. Past, present, and future. As Olivia fastened the locket around her neck, her gaze returned to the painting on the wall, the work of a woman she had never met but whose life had inexplicably shaped her own. In its abstract forms, she now saw what had perhaps always been there. Two figures, similar but distinct, reaching toward each other across an unbridgeable space, connected despite the distance between them. Just like the two Catherines, just like Ethan and herself, connected by invisible threads of history, chance, and choice. The complex, beautiful tapestry of human relationship that transcends time and binds us to one another in ways we might never fully understand, but can always choose to honor. If you enjoyed today's video, I'm sure you'll love the next one. Don't waste time. Just click on the screen